Welcome to the Explainer. Today we are doing something really cool. We're going to demystify the intimidating math behind modern machine learning. We'll trace the complete life cycle of a neural network model, all the way from its architectural foundations to how it's honestly evaluated in the real world. Think of this as opening up the hood of the AI engine to see exactly how the gears turn.
Let's kick things off with a bit of a brain teaser. Why on earth would an AI system that boasts a 99% accuracy rate actually fail catastrophically in the real world? It sounds totally backward, right? But stick with me, because by the end of this explainer, the mathematical reality behind the solution will be crystal clear. To figure this out, here's our roadmap for the explainer. We're looking at the bias-variance trade-off, measuring mistakes with math, the network's learning engine, navigating the loss landscape, controlling model complexity, and finally, evaluating true performance.
All right, jumping right into Section 1, the bias-variance trade-off, balancing the foundation. So the foundational goal of literally any machine learning model is perfectly navigating the bias-variance trade-off. This is the absolute bedrock of model generalization. First up, we have bias. You can think of bias as an engine that's just way too simple. It makes restrictive or erroneous assumptions and completely fails to capture the true underlying complexity of your data. If you try to fit a highly complex, nonlinear data set with just a simple straight line, well, your model is suffering from high bias. In machine learning, we universally refer to this condition as underfitting. On the flip side, we have variance. Variance represents a highly complex engine that overspecializes. Instead of learning the broad, generalizable patterns we actually want, a model with high variance essentially memorizes the training data, including all of its random, useless noise. When your model does this, it completely loses the ability to handle new, unseen data. We call this overfitting. The big takeaway here is that we have to mathematically optimize the model to live right in that sweet spot between underfitting and overfitting. It's a massive balancing act because decreasing bias typically increases variance, and vice versa. Our ultimate objective, finding the exact operational balance that minimizes the total expected test error. Moving on to Section 2, measuring mistakes with math, loss functions. Okay, so we know the goal is to minimize error. But how does a network actually measure its own mistakes? Well, there's a distinct divide in how we quantify these errors. If we're predicting continuous numbers, say the price of a house, we use regression loss functions like mean squared error or mean absolute error. These measure the literal geometric distance between our prediction and the truth. But if we're categorizing data into distinct buckets, like identifying a dog versus a cat, we use something called cross-entropy. Cross-entropy borrows from information theory to measure the probabilistic divergence between the network's confidence and the actual correct label. Next up, Section 3, the network's learning engine, forward and backward dynamics. With our loss function locked in, let's look at the beating heart of deep learning in 3 chronological steps. Step 1, the data flows forward through the layers of artificial neurons to make a prediction. Step 2, that loss function we just talked about quantifies exactly how wrong that prediction was. And Step 3, backpropagation. The error signal recursively flows backward through the entire network using the multivariate chain rule of calculus to calculate gradients. These gradients are essentially instructions, telling the network exactly how to update its internal weights to be just a little bit less wrong next time.
But wait a second. What happens when this entire mathematical engine suddenly breaks down and stops learning entirely? Why do parts of neural networks sometimes just die?
The culprit is often the infamous dying ReLU problem. You see, to learn complex patterns, networks use activation functions. The most common one is ReLU, which simply outputs 0 for any negative number. But if a massive gradient update pushes a neuron's weight so far that its output becomes perpetually negative, well, ReLU is strictly going to output 0 for every single data point. And since the derivative of a constant 0 is 0, the chain rule dictates that 0 gradient flows backward. That neuron becomes irreversibly inactive, dead. To fix this, engineers use architectural CPR, like leaky ReLU, which introduces a tiny negative slope so the derivative never fully zeroes out, preserving just enough variance so the neuron can actually recover.
All right, Section 4, navigating the loss landscape, optimizers.
So once our neurons are actively firing, the model has to blindly navigate a high-dimensional, highly non-convex landscape to find the lowest possible error. It's literally like walking down a mountain blindfolded. To descend this loss landscape, how much data should we look at before taking a step? We essentially have 2 extremes here.
Batch gradient descent looks at the entire dataset at once. It's theoretically super precise, but computationally agonizing and painfully slow. On the flip side, stochastic gradient descent evaluates just a single random example per step. It's lightning fast, but those localized gradients are heavily corrupted by noise, resulting in a highly erratic path. In practice, we usually compromise with mini batches to balance speed and stability.
But even with mini batches, standard descent often stalls out in flat topological ravines. The industry standard fix for this is the atom optimizer. Think of atom like a heavy bowling ball rolling down a hill. It builds momentum to push through flat plateaus while adaptively scaling its steps based on the terrain. Crucially, atom will look on a really clever mathematical bias correction trick. Because its internal memory starts at 0, its early steps are artificially tiny. Atom uses a geometric sum correction to renormalize these estimates, completely preventing the engine from stalling out and diverging early in the training process.
Which brings us to Section 5, Controlling Model Complexity, Regularization.
Here's the thing. If we let our engine run totally unchecked, it's eventually going to overheat and memorize everything, giving us that high variance we talked about earlier. We need mathematical safety rails. We apply artificial penalties to the loss function to explicitly force the model to favor simpler structures. First, we have L2 regularization, also known as ridge, which acts as a gentle smoother. It penalizes the square of the weights, meaning huge weights get heavily penalized, but as they shrink, the penalty naturally fades out. L1 regularization, however, is a ruthless minimalist. It penalizes the absolute magnitude, meaning it applies full force even when weights are tiny. This causes L1 to take large constant steps that can trap a parameter exactly at 0. It basically functions as an automated feature selector, entirely deleting irrelevant inputs right out of your model. And finally, Section 6, Evaluating True Performance, Beyond the Facade.
Okay, the engine is fully built, optimized, and regularized. But how do we honestly measure if it actually works out in the real world? Let's go back to that brain teaser from the very beginning. Imagine a fraud detection system where 99% of transactions are perfectly benign and only 1% are actually fraudulent. A completely broken, trivial model could just blindly guess benign every single time. It will claim 99% accuracy on a test while catching absolutely 0 actual fraud. Standard accuracy metrics are a dangerous mathematical facade when you're dealing with highly imbalanced real-world data.
This exact mathematical facade is why we use specialized metrics like the F1 score to solve this. Instead of raw accuracy, we look at precision, meaning how right are you when you actually call out fraud, and recall, meaning how much of the total fraud did you actually catch. But to combine them, we cannot use a simple arithmetic mean, because averaging ratios with different denominators violates basic statistics. Instead, the F1 score employs the harmonic mean. The harmonic mean is heavily influenced by the smaller of the two values. It brutally punishes any model that tries to cheat by maxing out recall while completely ignoring precision. You really have to be strong in both.
Finally, since neural networks output continuous probabilities, we have to set a hard operational threshold to make a final decision. To evaluate exactly where to draw that line, we utilize PRAUC, or the precision recall area under curve. Unlike other curves that get artificially inflated by that 99% of benign data, PRAUC's math completely ignores true negatives. It is mathematically blind to the majority class, proving the model's true, uninflated effectiveness on the rarest, most critical data points.
Understanding these mathematical fixes from F1 scores to atom optimizers really transforms dense formulas into deliberate, elegant engineering solutions. But it leaves us with one final provocative thought to take away today. As modern AI models scale exponentially to hundreds of billions of parameters, will these exact same mathematical guardrails continue to hold up? Or is the sheer complexity of the data outpacing the very metrics we use to measure it? Definitely something to think about next time you read about a massive new AI breakthrough.